The streaming era has completely changed the way we enjoy and consume media, especially movies. Practically anything you could ever want to watch is just a couple clicks away, but the convenience of having an unlimited selection has also really taken the magic out of discovering something new. Nothing, honestly, could ever live up to the hype of channel surfing in the late hours of the evening and finding new and strange movies you'd start watching from some point in the middle. That was how I first discovered the Mad Max franchise, as I stumbled upon The Road Warrior at a far too young age. The only way to get the whole context to see the entire movie you'd caught a glimpse of would be to either hope it came on again or to visit your local video store. This sense of discovery was how I came to learn about the movie we'll be discussing today, the 1984 science fiction cult classic, The Last Starfighter. When we discussed Battle Beyond the Stars a couple of weeks ago, many of you were offended that I called the movie a Star Wars ripoff, and I should clarify, ripoff doesn't mean exact copy. Both it and the movie we're looking at today were created to bank off the success of Star Wars. They were made directly as a response to Star Wars, and most likely would not have been made or greenlit whatsoever had Star Wars not been a genre-defining blockbuster. I also don't inherently think it's a bad thing to be a ripoff. There are so many beloved movies and shows which could be considered ripoffs of earlier stories. The Matrix, for example, has been called a pretty big ripoff of Grant Morrison's comic The Invisibles, and even Star Wars itself heavily reused ideas and concepts from dozens of other pieces of media. So when I call a movie like The Last Starfighter a Star Wars ripoff, it's not meant to put down the movie in any sense. The Last Starfighter may live in the shadow of its more successful sci-fi forefather, but the two films take their intergalactic stories in entirely different ways. The inception for the idea began when unexpected screenwriter Jonathan R. Betshell was on his lunch break at a nearby arcade. He happened to be in the middle of reading The Once and Future King by T.H. White, a collection of novels based on Arthurian legends. It was then he had the idea of a modern retelling of The Sword and the Stone through the lens of the newly emerging cultural phenomenon of video games. The Excalibur of the film would be an arcade game known simply as Starfighter, a cabinet disguised as a training tool in order to find and recruit the best starfighters in the galaxy to join the Star League and defend the frontier from Xur and the Codon Armada. Our Arthur stand-in would be teenager Alex Rogan, the son of a struggling single mother who dreams of a life beyond his mundane upbringing. I gotta say, I'm a big fan of this entire plot concept. It's like a little bit Ender's Game, a little bit the episode Best Friends Forever from South Park, where Kenny is recruited to fight a celestial war because of his PSP skills. Anyway, the youth dreaming of a life beyond their mundane upbringing makes it hard to not draw comparisons between Alex and Luke Skywalker given the genre, but the producers were actually more afraid of comparisons to Spielberg's films like E.T. and Poltergeist. The screenplay was written sharing the suburban setting of these movies. Something changed when Nick Castle was brought on board as a director. Nick Castle may be a name familiar to horror fans and is probably best well known for portraying Michael Myers, or as he was credited, The Shape, in the first two Halloween movies. Castle suggested that rather than Alex wanting to escape the comfort of the suburbs, he lived a much less glamorous and more secluded life at the Starlight Starbright trailer park. This choice honestly made the film feel different than a lot of the Spielbergian films of the era, offering a balance between the optimism in his films and a more harsh, cynical edge. This was something seen in many of frequent Nick Castle collaborator John Carpenter's movies, and it really feels like his fingerprints were all over this one. The main cast featured Lance Guest, who made his film debut alongside Castle in Halloween 2, and Dan O'Hurley, who was coming off his role as the main antagonist of Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Despite not being even remotely a horror film, The Last Starfighter has some genuinely creepy and suspenseful scenes. The standout moment I often think about is when Alex's robotic doppelganger Beta is generating Alex's appearance, and we get a brief glimpse of the fleshy, pulsating human struggling to breathe, or when the grotesque alien bounty hunters, known as the Xando Zans, attempt to kill Alex. The effects in this film are really well done, especially the variety of different alien characters we meet, some of which only appear on screen for a few moments. The most popular species are the Rylans, who are humans with extremely pronounced skulls and, yes, of course, a severe case of male pattern baldness. They look silly, but with a high-concept sci-fi movie of the 80s, you gotta cut them some slack, especially seeing how innovative The Last Starfighter was with not only its practical effects, but also early use of CGI. This is probably the most dated aspect of the film. The CGI is almost entirely untextured, and under a modern lens, it doesn't really hold up, but both this and Disney's Tron, which we discovered a few days ago, are considered pioneers for the medium. 27 minutes of CGI is on screen during The Last Starfighter, 12 minutes more than what moviegoers had experienced in Tron 2 years earlier. Despite looking worse than what they probably could have done with miniatures at the time, the CGI isn't that bad, and they never try to go beyond the limitations of the technology as it existed. The story is simple and effective, largely thanks to witty writing and great performances. The Starlight Starbright trailer park is occupied by some really charming supporting characters who all have so much depth and chemistry that they come off like this big, supportive, extended family. The evil Zur is terrifically over the top and is played by Norman Snow, who takes full advantage of the role and is as goofy as possible. Also, there's Centauri, the creator of Starfighter. He's always referring to himself in third person and has this wonderfully charming musical cadence to everything he says.
You may have thought it was a game, but it was also a test. Aha! A test!
My personal favorite character is Greg the Gung-Ho Iguana, who is always doing this hilarious open mouth exhale laugh. I tried to do it. It didn't really come out. It just sounds like I'm coughing. But our central character, Alex Rogan, is a really likable protagonist. You sympathize with his conflict. Like I said before, if you know Luke, you know him. He's pulled between the responsibilities he has at home and desire to spend time with his friends until destiny comes knocking. The performance from Lance Guest helps put a more sarcastic and comedic spin on the unlikely hero archetype, and he plays it cool the entire time as he's experiencing this larger universe he never knew about. Guest gives another great performance as Beta, the robot duplicate blending in as Alex on Earth, while the original is on his intergalactic adventure. These scenes with Beta are a highlight. While Alex is a fish out of water among the Star League, Beta struggles to pretend to be human, but manages to share Alex's sense of humor.
Lewis, you're having a terrible nightmare. Go back to sleep.
This character was actually so popular during test screenings that they brought some of the cast back to shoot more scenes with Beta, which is funny because Lance Guest is wearing a very noticeable wig. But you know, it's excusable. Beta, while an almost perfect double for Alex, is artificial, so certain aspects look more fake than others. And in the end, I do think it was really important to add some additional scenes on Earth. The script very well could have solely followed Alex and been bookended by the Earth scenes, but they take full advantage of the lovable cast of characters from the trailer park with more time spent on the planet. When Alex is going for the record on Starfighter early on in the movie, and literally everyone from the trailer comes to cheer him on, that's a great scene, and you get a sense that while Alex yearns for a life outside, he's never really ashamed of who he is or where he comes from. You also get this at the end of the movie when he introduces Greg to the residents of Starlight Starbright. For a science fiction adventure, the movie really makes you like all of its characters in some way, and there are no missed opportunities. Pretty much everyone is memorable. Speaking of memorable, we have to talk about the centerpiece of the movie, the Starfighter arcade machine. I remember seeing this game as a kid and wanting to play it so bad, and the end of the movie actually made me think it was real. This credit led to me searching for a Starfighter arcade game for years until I eventually tried to find it on the internet, only to learn that the game never saw the light of day. Atari canceled the video game after seeing the movie and deciding it wasn't worth their time to make a game since it probably would flop at the box office. It, however, did not flop, but the box office numbers were also not especially great, grossing only $28 million on a budget of $15. The Last Starfighter, however, would go on to gain a cult following, finding an audience with frequent airings on TV and its home video release. While the arcade never would see an adaptation of the film, Atari was developing a game for home consoles and computers which would be altered and released as Star Raiders 2 and Solaris. A game with the title The Last Starfighter would be released for the NES in 1990, but this was not a true game adaptation, instead being an altered port of the Commodore 64 game Uridium. Starfighter, thankfully, would eventually be made as a freeware PC title developed by fan developer Rogue Synapse. The game is a one-to-one recreation of the game featured in the movie. It's free to download and is exactly the game I always wanted to play. You can play it by clicking the link down in the description. Since the late 2000s, there have been multiple attempts to revive The Last Starfighter, including potential sequels, a remake, or a TV adaptation, but due to the rights being with the original screenwriter, John Betchell, the decision to continue the story lies in his hands alone. Personally, I think there's a lot of fun to be had, especially with how gaming has evolved since 1984, and with the right creatives behind the project, it could be a welcome return. As it stands now, this Last Starfighter is a perfect cult science fiction anomaly that, despite some dated visuals, really is charming and timeless, and I hope kids today enjoy it just as much as I did when I first watched the film. But that's all we've got for now. If you want to see more of this kind of video, make sure to subscribe and drop a like. We've got other brief essays like this on Battle Beyond the Stars and more on screen right now. See you next time.